Good evening and welcome to the Press Club for this week. I'm Kendall Burton. My co-host, Mr. Earl Busker, is here. Second show since he's been back from, should I say where you were?
Yes, inside the Great Wall.
Inside the Great Wall. Let's take a look at some of the headlines making today's papers. The Star newspaper, Fernand Francois back in the spotlight. Francois celebrates. Another headline, Priest Rick Wayne talk porn, a reference to the discussion on the talk show on DBS on Thursday evening. The Voice newspaper, Wasco sit down, 100 employees stop work over agreement delay and cloak of silence over child abuse. The Mirror newspaper, Wasco also topping that. Wasco workers in wage dispute, workers say no to 9% increase over 6 years. And the Nationwide newspaper, the government's official newspaper, St. Lucia achieves major milestone ahead of COP21. Let's start with something that didn't make the headlines in the papers, but there are two stories at least in the Voice and the Star newspaper. In the Star newspaper, UWP convention, the highs and lows, and the opinion article in the Voice newspaper on page 6, the Alan and Mary show, the theater continues. We touched on it very briefly last week, but we did not get to discuss the UWP convention. Obviously, was the day after the show, but we've had enough time to take it in and listen to some of the stories coming out of the convention. Coming out of the UWP convention, is the party more united, more divided? We heard calls from the likes of Mary Polius, Leonard Spider-Montoot, even Stephenson King to some extent before the convention, calling for the postponement of that event. The suggestion from Leonard Montoot and his supporters is that the party was too divided after the last convention. Going into this convention would exacerbate the problem. Do you think that prediction has been fulfilled?
Well, first of all, I think that the one clear message that came out of the convention is that Alan Chastanet continues to be the king of his kingdom. The two persons, I think, who came out of the convention happiest would have been the party leader, Mr. Chastanet, and the former challenger, Mrs. Sarah Flood Bobray, from the standpoint is that before the convention, she was sure she had what it would take to beat Mr. Chastanet, to lead the party into a successful election, and to be the next Prime Minister of St. Lucia. After the convention, she indicated that she's in the party to stay. She's not going anywhere else. And as a matter of fact, she would send the clear message that whoever else may be thinking of forming a new party, she's not interested. And the day after, it was announced that the party's executive would have been meeting quite soon to find a role for Mrs. Flood Bobray. And she publicly acknowledged the offer and said that she would accept any role that is offered to her. And speculation is rife that the role that has been seen as being appropriate to offer her would be the party's next candidate for Castries Central. Mr. Chastanet was quizzed about that just a few days before the convention, and even at the convention, as to whether a candidate had already been selected for Castries Central, and he made it clear that no, it was too early and that a choice hadn't been made. It will be interesting, therefore, because while Mr. Frederick may or may not contest the election to retain his seat, he has indicated the only way he would run would be for the UWP would be under a different leader. But Mrs. Bobray has won that seat before, and it would be interesting to find out what would become of Mr. Peterson Francis, who has long been seen as the natural choice, him having transitioned from the Labour Party, with one of his complaints being that the party did not see it fit to give him a seat, allow him to contest the seat. So if it was assumed that he had made that transition because he had been promised the seat. And remember, he had been challenged by Dr. Andre Matthew, and he pointed out that Dr. Matthew was too late in that the nomination process was already closed. Is it that the party has decided to reopen the Castries Central seat in order to keep Mrs. Flood Beaubrin? So that's why I said she and Mr. Chastanet are the two happiest people. On the other hand, the ones who you mentioned earlier, the dissidents within the party, they now have to return to the drawing board, because Mr. Chastanet indicated quite clearly, not by his words but by his actions, that he was not interested in a meeting to smoke the peace pipe before the convention. In the period since the convention, I'm not aware that he has invited them to meet or has agreed to meet with them as they had requested. So it seems to me what they have to remember is that after he won and he made his winning speech, Mr. Chastanet made it absolutely clear, and he said so to the press as well, that those who support him should work with him to ensure the party can win the next election, but that those who do not support him need to jump aboard or resign. And I think that that was a clear message to the likes of Mr. King, Mr. Mortut, Mrs. Polius, and others who have a problem with Mr. Chastanet's leadership. The other issue is that the extent of his victory, you know, 255 or 280 versus 55, it is the most clear margin of all the three. And the problem that the dissidents have, and I have a problem with them not finding ways and means to explain what their problem is, because they've been skirting around saying that the process is flawed. They use all of those adjectives to suggest that there is something Mr. Chastanet is doing and has been doing that is guaranteeing the number of votes, and therefore they have concerns. Mr. King got very close to it, saying that he had these concerns from 2013 when he was lost, and he did use the phrase saying, we're in the final hour. You know, so it's all left to be seen what the likes of Mr. King and Mr. Mortut and the other leading dissidents, including Mr. Bousquet and others, it's all left to be seen where they're going to throw their dice at this point in time, when, like I said, Mr. Chastanet has demonstrated quite clearly he's king of the UWP kingdom.
Yeah, well, I think the suggestion has been made that it is rigged, the electoral process. That the suggestion has been made that money may have exchanged hands, or that people have been influencing persons in terms of how to vote, actually filling out the ballots for them, and that sort of thing. So there needs to be, I think, perhaps a review of that process. And it's not the first time that we've heard squabbles or complaints about the internal functioning of the party. We've heard it from
Claudius
Sprayville. We've heard it from others along the way. So perhaps the time is ripe now to start with that, in terms of settling things in the party.
You have heard these things by the wayside as suggestions.
But nobody has come out.
But nobody has come out. Mr. King is one who, as Prime Minister, whenever his administration or any of his ministers were accused of anything, he would say, where is the evidence? You know, and observers and members of his party would be asking the same question to him. Where is the evidence?
But I think it has been said before, and I think Mr. Chastanet is right. You know, if you're not happy with the party, either you put up or you shut up. Get out, or, you know, commit. If you have the interest of the party at heart and you really think that we have a chance at, you know, the next election, let us marshal our forces, consolidate, and put things together, present a united front. But this public squabble and fighting is not helping the party in any form or any fashion. The Star newspaper has a quote here from Mr. Shastny after his victory, where he said that he blasted the government's foreign policies and what is described as the jobs for the boys under the Citizenship by Investment program. This government is unethical, it is immoral, we must change this government as soon as possible. This is the other challenge, I think, for the UWP right now. Apart from convincing the electorate that they have discussed and solved the issues, united the party, I don't think they've done a very good job of presenting themselves as an alternative in terms of solutions for the problems facing the country. All right. Is Sarah Flood coming on board, Sarah Flood Bobra coming on board, going to change that in any way, you think?
No, I think I have always had issue with how the respective parties choose candidates. And it is the strength of a candidate that determines his or her possibility to win. And it is, again, the quality of that victorious candidate that will determine the quality of your cabinet, the leadership of your country. As things stand now, both parties' selection process is essentially around finding the person who can win the votes. And the reason why that person can win the votes can vary from him or her being popular, him or her, being somebody who is a major business person or a property owner, But it is never, in my view, it is not sufficiently about that person having the quality to be a minister in government and an MP, district representative.
Are you suggesting that it is too personality driven and
yes, it is.
issues based?
I'm saying it is. It's too personality driven, so that you have two parties going, or three parties, or all parties going into an election on the basis of the ability of the candidate to win, as against the ability of that candidate to deliver the goods. So that in many instances where you have runoffs in both parties, the person selected might be more the person who is favored by the leadership or the leader than the best of the two or three persons. You look at the ancillary canneries runoff. There are the UWP supporters up to the night of the vote. The general consensus and expectation was not what the result was. So was there a fundamental shift on the ground? Was the party unable to read the tea leaves? Or was one of the four candidates just so damn good that he was able to influence one of the four candidates not even voting for himself? So that then you look at the same ancillary canneries situation as we speak now. There is a sitting MP who won, but he's also being challenged by someone who sees himself or herself as being able to do better. Now, who decides? It's the 100 or 20, it's the members of the constituency group. So if like you said, insofar as the UWP elections are concerned in terms of the convention, if victory lies in your ability to influence how people vote, and it is not necessarily influenced by ideology, strategy, etc., but say it is influenced by money, by gain, by promise, you know, by situations other than political considerations, then the race is for the swift. In that case, who have the most money will always be guaranteed how the people are going to vote. So that I have quite often, and I think you will remember, I've advocated this more than a year ago here, and that is that I can see the two parties, given their proximity in age, size, and everything else, in the interest, in the national interest, working through their respective foundations to have a sort of a common ground on a list of prescriptions for a candidate. You know, like I said, a candidate ought to have read the Constitution. A candidate ought to have read the standing orders of the House of Assembly and the Senate, so that if you win, you don't have to be going and read that again. A candidate ought to know a little bit about every ministry, what it's responsible for. A candidate ought to recognize the difference between being an MP, member of parliament, and being a cabinet minister. You know, a candidate got to know the difference between being a district representative, which is what you went into the election for, to be voted to be a district representative, on the basis of which you become a member of parliament and an MP, and on the basis of which you might also be selected to be a cabinet minister. So your candidate now, before agreeing to be a candidate, will have to understand that if you win, there are three things you'll have to be doing simultaneously. Representing your people who voted for you and all of the people in your constituency, representing the entire constituency in parliament, which is a different job, and thirdly, if you're a member of cabinet, being able to serve the nation in that capacity while still being representative for your constituency and MP in parliament. So does that one person, that candidate, is he or she aware that you can end up doing all those things? Are they aware also that the party leader of the ruling party, the party that wins, is who decides what ministry you get? You know, and that you might be going into the election with a wish that should I win, I will naturally expect that ministry, and then your political leader, the new prime minister, decides you're not getting that ministry. Will you get vexed? You know, so in other words, I'm saying that if the parties can agree to a common list of requirements for candidates, I think they would be investing in ensuring that the crop of persons who offer themselves for office are persons who have given it thought, who understand the, not risks and the roles and the benefits, but the responsibilities that will come with each and every one of those things. Yeah, I think that if the parties do that, and there are people in all the parties who are thinking that way, because we're all, as a people and as a country, basically fed up with the system as it is.
All right, we're due for a break. We'll take the break. When we come back, we'll conclude our conversation on the UWP convention and shift our focus and look at some of the other stories making the news this week. This is The Press Club.